Hey, what's going on everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Now today we're going to be talking about some more DC20, but this is going to be my first impressions because recently I got to DM the Hunted one-shot for DC20, and let me tell you, I got a lot of good things to say about the system. So hopping straight into it, I want to talk about kind of the fluidity and overall comfortability of the system as a whole. Now, when it comes to playing the system, just so you are aware, it was me and 3 of my other friends. I was pretty well versed in the system. Obviously it's my first time playing through it, so I still wasn't 100% sure on things. We had to do rule checks and stuff like that. The other 3 had access to the book and read through it a little bit, but we're not like super in depth on it. That being said, at least when it came to the roleplay side of things, it was not bad at all. If you've played a TTRPG before, or you've played especially like Dungeons and Dragons, you'll feel right at home. You're not going to be like super lost, super confused, super whatever. It's the same kind of vibe, especially in that world where you're rolling a d20, trying to hit a DC to, successfully do the thing you're doing. One thing I really liked when DMing it is my ability to ask my players for a physical save or a mental save. That was really, really nice, or a physical check or a mental check. Because when it comes to the system, right, we've talked about there are 2 physical and 2 mental saves, but let's say there's a boulder rolling at them, right? And I want them to dodge this boulder. You could maybe argue that it could be a might thing where you're just using your raw muscles to stop this boulder, or it could be an agility thing where you are managing to like dodge and avoid this boulder, in which case I could ask you, hey, make me a physical save, and then you can choose between your 2 physical stats how you want to do it. And that was very nice. It kind of gave the players some agency, made them feel a little more involved, right? Because they kind of get to mentally imagine and decide how their character would handle the situation, and doesn't slow down at all. Another aspect was the social challenges and kind of combat challenges. Now these were more roleplay stuff, and I am fully aware that these are not like original to the system and have been used and talked about before, but they are implemented into the system and I think they are super cool. So as for a social challenge, what is it? Well, basically there is a encounter DC, so let's say it's 12, and there's a number of success points that the team must reach. So we will use 3 because that's what we had in our campaign or our little mini one-shot. Now, whenever a player steps up to this social challenge, in our case, to give you an example, they were walking into a brand new guild hall they had never been in, and they were trying to basically, impress the head of the guild hall, Eugene. And they could do whatever they wanted. They could try to impress him with a really cool, powerful attack, or maybe by showing off a spell, or maybe by smooth talking him, or maybe by tricking him in some form or fashion, right? And the players can choose how they want to do this, and then I as a DM say, okay, well, you can roll me a trickery check, or you can roll me a spell check, or something like that in order to, accomplish and try to beat this encounter DC of 12. And every player that beats it gets a success point. If you've watched my videos before, you know how the system works. If they do roll a 17, they would get 2 success points because of that +5 rule. So things like that. If they do beat the encounter DC for this social challenge in particular, then they would get more benefits at the end of it. Very simple, very straightforward, very cool. It's very awesome because it allows one thing that I think is super hard for a lot of tables, and that is including everybody, even the players that don't always, do their thing and kind of sit on the sideline. And it pulls them in and it says, hey, you're involved now. It's your time to play, which is really good because while I fully understand not everyone wants to be involved in every conversation in a campaign. Sometimes people like being that kind of spectator role in the party. There's nothing wrong with that, but they still usually want to be included. And this is a very easy way to be like, hey, all 3 of you have to now interact with this thing. And it's very clear, very concise, very simple. Anyway, I absolutely love that. And the other side of that are combat challenges, but those are basically for easy combat encounters. You just do the same exact thing where you have an encounter DC, have them roll, and they have to hit a number of success points to slay the monster, so to speak. Or in the example that was in this one shot, they will always succeed in slaying the monster, but if they do fail, then some of them are going to take some damage in return. So kind of a cool way to do some role play in terms of combat or social challenges or anything of that nature. Now, for why most of you probably clicked on the video to learn about first impressions, because to be honest, a lot of TTRPGs are going to play similarly when it comes to the roleplay aspect, but what about the combat? Let me tell you, combat is A+. It's not perfect. There are some things that need to be tuned, and we will discuss that. But overall, the kind of bare bones, like raw skeleton framework of how the combat is, genuinely chef's kiss. So before continuing, I want to get a few clarifications out of the way. One, yes, this was me and my 3 friends' first time playing it. So there were a few speed bumps while trying to learn it. There were a few, hey, we need to check the rules moments. And we even learned afterward that we played a few things wrong, just not 100% sure how they worked. But hey, it is what it is. You live and you learn. That being said, again, it was still a very, very good time. And I first kind of want to talk about the action point system, because action point systems can be a bit concerning for some, and I understand that, but I want to alleviate some concerns that I had, and I assume some of you had as well, having actually played with it now. First combat issue I want to go over and discuss is going to be analysis paralysis and kind of the discussion around that, because usually a big concern, especially with an action point system, is that with 4 action points that can kind of do anything, it's a little concerning, where it's like, for a lot of players, are they going to be okay making choices? And at least in my experience, my limited experience so far, yeah, the system is well made enough that you can kind of just see the basic idea of, oh, this would be a pretty good turn, and then they'll sit there and go through it. And a lot of times, your min-maxers are going to be able to pretty clearly see what the right path is to kind of make an ideal turn. Now, there's still choices that make it more interesting than something like Dungeons & Dragons with just action and bonus action. So I think that aspect is really nice and really good. But again, it doesn't do such a, terrible job as to make the people that kind of struggle to make the choices on what they want to do even harder. Another thing I want to talk about is the fact that this is a level 1 one-shot, which in a lot of other systems would be near unplayable. Okay, a lot of systems level 1 is not very good, it's not super usable, especially in D&D, right? A lot of your kind of big DMs are going to do the thing where they just either A, speed you through the first like 2 or 3 levels as fast as possible within like 2 or 3 sessions, or they're just going to straight up start you at level 3, which, not that there's necessarily anything wrong with that once you're experienced with D&D, but if you are a new D&D player, it's going to feel really unnatural and really odd when it's like, oh hey, we're going to start a new game, you get a new character, but you're starting at level 3 and not level 1, right? It just feels weird. But this game, DC20, feels really good to play at level 1, which is surprising. It's a very rare thing for a game to feel balanced and not feel like you're missing out on a ton of stuff. Obviously, you don't have subclass features and things like that. You'll gain those as you level up, but you still feel fine. You're not taking hits that are instantly killing you. And to be honest, I think a lot of this has to do with the lack of damage dice, which I would now like to bring up. So I made a video recently about the lack of damage dice in DC20, and let me just say, I think it's great. I think it is genuinely so good, and it's for a lot of the reasons that I talk about in that video. And I think this is also why level 1 actually works and is actually playable, is because the system is based around a lot of your weapons and things like that, dealing 1, maybe 2 damage with additional things on top if certain conditions are met, which is so nice. It's so good. When I tell you it sped up the combat, I mean it sped up the combat. The lack of damage dice made playing this system for 4 people, including the DM who hasn't played the system before, run almost just as fast as some D&D encounters I've been with people that have been playing D&D for years, which is crazy. It's absolutely insane. Not only that, I didn't miss the dice for a second. I'm gonna be honest, obviously I make all my videos pretty positively because I think DC20 overall is a fantastic system that I hope gets to grow and flourish and hopefully become a big name in the TTRPG scene. But I had my doubts, especially with the damage dice thing, and a lot of people do, and I gotta say they knocked it out of the park. Whenever you're sitting there playing, you kind of forget that they need to be there, and the system's also very fluid and very logical as well, because as you're playing, you have your things like your heavy and brutal hits, which are when you beat the DC by 5 or 10. And it's super easy. My players would roll to hit, they would roll a 17, and I would go, well, that is a brutal hit. And they would then tell me the damage, but they would know in their brains, oh, I get to add 1 for brutal. So now instead of dealing 2 damage, oh, well, I dealt 3 damage with that attack. Mark it off, continue on, go to the next thing. Genuinely, the no damage dice, I'm not going to sit here and rant about too much because I just had a video on it, but it turned out to be even better than I thought it would be. Alright, hopping off the tangent train for a little bit and kind of reeling it back in. Talking about the action point system again, another thing I want to mention is the creativity that players are allowed to have in combat with this system. Like I've talked about before, when it comes to a system like Dungeons & Dragons, whenever you're playing, you have your movement, you have your action, you have your bonus action. That's it. That's what you're working with, alright? It's not the end of the world, but it's pretty limiting because you must use something that is an action. You must use something that is a bonus action. Sometimes you don't even have a bonus action to use. And then you have your movement, which sometimes will just go to waste. This 4-point action point system is so good because for my 2 players that I had that were a little more min-maxy and a little more like trying to get the most out of their character in combat and really focusing on like trying different things and adding different stuff, the options that they had were not limitless, but it seemed that way. As the DM, I'm watching them do these really cool things of like using one little action point for movement, and then as they run up, they're going to use one to do this shield slam, and then they're going to gain advantage on that, and then because they're gaining advantage on that, they're going to use their last point to like help their teammate over there. Super cool. Super cool stuff. So overall, I just wanted to kind of add that aspect in there of the creativity that the 4-point action point system allows for the players that kind of want to dive a little bit more in depth and are more of your combat centric players. Yeah, really good. Before I get to my final thoughts, I do think it's only fair to talk about some of the, let's say, challenges or things that maybe weren't quite perfect in terms of the system that we found playing. One thing that we actually kind of ran into is the way that the system works. You have a physical defense and a mystical defense, okay? And these are kind of like your AC, but for different types of attacks. It took us a second to kind of get used to that, okay? Because you would think, oh, it's like, well, things like weapons, swords, crossbows are going to hit your physical, and spells are going to hit your mystical. Not always. When it comes to spells, some spells hit your physical because there's things like a fireball, which is like a physical explosion thing happening, right? And some of them hit your mystical, which are more like charm effects, things that affect the brain and that kind of stuff. It's not that that's the hardest thing in the world to do, but there were a few times where we kind of slipped up because my one person playing a spellcaster went ahead and would be like, okay, this is hitting their physical, and then one of them hit their mental, but I didn't realize it hit their mental, and so we kind of had to like retroactively fix that and go back and do it, and vice versa, right? Just not being 100% sure. So that's one thing that's a little wonky, and I don't think that's necessarily something wrong with the system, and more just something you have to get used to. But as for coming from other TTRPGs, that is a bit of a kind of weird thing to get used to and get comfortable with. Again, it's not like the biggest negative in the world, but it is something that we ran into. I think something that could help that as well is in the spell's descriptions, it'll usually say like this targets their physical defense or something, but to my knowledge, there wasn't like just like a symbol next to the spell, which I think would do it a lot of good. Just adding like a little PD or MD like right next to the spell title, I think could do a lot for helping kind of alleviate some of that confusion. The last thing I'm going to mention in kind of the negatives category is going to be the overall balance of the classes, which they might be more balanced than it seems for us, okay? Because to be honest, we have played one shot and they had made 3 characters. Little did we know that one of them played Commander, which is currently one of, if not the strongest class in the game, especially at level 1. And I went and messaged the kind of Discord about it to make sure that we were like playing it correctly, because I really felt like it was overtuned, and they said it is. It's very clearly the strongest class in the game, but the devs know about it, so before full release, they're definitely going to be kind of bringing it down to scale a little bit. So no major concerns there. It's just something I noticed that the classes were a slightly imbalanced in terms of like their power level and what they could do, because the Commander was in their turn letting someone else attack with advantage for a single action. They could help someone, which would regain any stamina they had used. Whenever they do use stamina, it would also allow them to do that thing and then heal someone else. It was a lot. The like little chain loop that he was creating was doing a lot of things in just this 4-point turn. But hey, I mean, when it comes to these games, there's always going to be stronger classes and subclasses than other ones. That's how it works. Not everything's going to be perfectly balanced, but I just want to be truthful in that that's something that we kind of noticed and went through. again, it wasn't the end of the world. It wasn't like this person was overshadowing and just destroying every combat outright. It was just pretty clear that they were doing a lot of things comparatively. Final thoughts. Where are we at? Well, out of 10, I think the system is currently at about a 7.5. Maybe even an 8, okay? And the main reason it's not higher is because we don't have all the stuff yet. We don't have, like, when it comes to, like, the magic item stuff, he's kind of talked and teased it, but we haven't seen it. We don't have anything past level 2 characters, so we didn't get to play around and mess around with subclasses. The talent list is very limited because it's still, like, beta rules, so a lot of the things that keep this system from going higher than, like, a 7.5 or an 8 are just because they haven't been released yet, and they're gonna be released soon. So genuinely amazing. Again, while I would put it at like a 7.5 or an 8, I think the system can easily be a 9 and possibly a 10 if it like continues on. And I know I have been nothing but positive, so I'm sure some of y'all like, well, obviously you feel that way, you have a lot of bias, but I just genuinely feel this way, and after playing it, I think the system is so much fun. But anyway, we'll go ahead and move on before I continue my rant. If y'all are wanting to actually see the gameplay and see the one-shot, let me know down in the comments. It's something I could go through and post. I'm going to be honest, it was a pretty rough one-shot, and again, even with that, I felt the system was pretty good, but between us trying to like figure out rules, make sure we're doing everything correctly, make sure everything's going smoothly, and I'm going to be honest, there were some things that, like I said earlier, we played incorrectly. Like, this is going to sound silly, but we may not have realized there was a check to escape a grapple until after we finished. There's a reason we didn't know it was there. I'm not going to excuse myself because we thought it was really weird that there wasn't a way to escape a grapple, but there was, and we were just silly little geese that didn't read through the book, okay? But nonetheless, I can post it. It's a little bit of a scuffed playthrough, so if you want to see it, let me know. If we get enough comments and enough people interested, I'll post it, and y'all can watch in all of its glory the absolutely scuffed one-shot that we went through. But nonetheless, I hope you enjoyed. I hope this really turned you on to DC20 and let you see that, hey, I now have some playthrough time and some of the perks, some of the pros, maybe even some of the cons. And, you know, you can make an informed decision on if it's something you want to continue pursuing. But nonetheless, hope y'all had a good one, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace out.